I sold my kidney to save my son from loan sharks. Then he took the money, fled the country, and left me bleeding alone. No apology. No goodbye. And when his loan sharks showed up, they said if I didn't pay his debt, they'd take the rest of me. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. I never imagined the day would come when I'd be begging strangers in an alley overseas to cut into my body and take something I couldn't grow back. But that's where my son led me. It started on a Sunday afternoon. I was folding laundry and humming an old gospel song when Tyrone knocked on my door, looking like the world had fallen on him. His eyes were red like he hadn't slept, and his hands kept twitching. He didn't hug me, didn't even sit down, just stood there trembling, saying, "Mama, I messed up bad this time." Tyrone had always been one for trouble. Little things at first. Late night calls about car wrecks or needing help with rent. Then it turned into gambling. Cards, dice, sports betting. I lost count of how many times I'd begged him to stop. But he'd always come back, saying it was just a phase. That he had it under control. This time was different. "There's people after me," he said. "Real people. Dangerous. They said I got 5 days to pay up or they're coming for me." I sat down slowly, my knees already aching from arthritis. "How much, Tyrone?" He couldn't even look me in the eye. 80 grand. The number hung in the air like a punch. Thought I heard wrong. I asked again. He repeated it. $80,000. I didn't even have 800 in my account. My pension covered my rent, my medication, and groceries when they were on sale. I was already behind on my electric bill. I told him as gently as I could that I had nothing to give. He started pacing, clutching his head. "I found a way," he said. "I did some research. Mama, don't freak out, but there's this guy, okay? He helps people sell kidneys." My stomach turned. I stood up, heart pounding. "You lost your mind?" "It's safe," he said quickly. "It's not like the horror stories. They fly you out, do it clean. You get cash. All of it up front. It's not illegal technically. Just quiet." I stared at him like he'd grown horns. "You expect me to cut open my body to fix your gambling?" He dropped to his knees and grabbed my hands. "Mama, please. They'll kill me. They said they'd make me disappear. I don't got nobody else. Just you." That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Tyrone's face when he said they'd kill him. A part of me wanted to scream at him, "Then sell mine yourself if it's so easy." But who would trust a desperate gambler with that kind of job? The syndicate wouldn't wait. The people he owed would never accept. I'm working on it. I thought about calling the police. But what would I even tell them? My son owes criminals 80 grand and wants me to sell my kidney? They'd laugh. Or worse, arrest him and do nothing to stop the people coming after him. And I thought maybe this was how I could still be useful. Maybe this was how I could protect him one last time. My body's tired anyway. Blood pressure, arthritis, nerve pain. I'd already stopped walking to church. What did I need 2 kidneys for? I told myself it was just a piece of flesh. But deep down I knew it was a piece of me he'd never give back. I called the number he gave me the next morning. The man on the other end had a soft voice, too calm. Said he'd arrange everything. A short trip. A clean hospital. I wouldn't be awake for anything, and the payment would be made before the surgery. Tyrone said he'd handle the money, since I wouldn't be in any shape to travel with it after. He'd fly back with me. Stay with me while I recovered. Make everything right. I agreed. The flight was long and quiet. I was too ashamed to speak to the kind nurse who sat beside me. When we landed in Manila, they took me straight to a clinic. Not the kind I'd imagined, but not a shack either. White walls, cold air, unfamiliar smells. I signed papers I didn't understand. The surgeon looked 30. Everyone smiled too much. When I woke up, I felt like death. My side throbbed like it had been hit with a hammer. Breathing hurt. Sitting up felt impossible. They gave me soup and pills and told me everything had gone well. Tyrone was sitting by my bed holding my hand. He looked tired but calm. "It's done," he whispered. "You saved me, Mama." That was the last time I saw the real Tyrone. We flew back 3 days later. Could barely walk. He helped me into the cab, then into my apartment. I lay in bed, drifting in and out of sleep. I remember asking him if the loan sharks were off his back. He just nodded, said something about taking care of it. I didn't press. I trusted him. 2 days later, I woke up to an empty apartment. No Tyrone. No note on the fridge. His phone went straight to voicemail. I waited a day. Then another. I thought maybe he went to the store. Maybe he needed to clear his head. On the third day I found it. A piece of notebook paper tucked under my Bible. I needed a clean slate. Don't worry, you'll be all right. No apology. No explanation. Just that. I collapsed to the floor. My stitches pulled. My breath came out in gasps. I screamed into the empty room until my throat hurt. He never intended to pay anyone. He used me. My own son. My body was ruined. I was bruised, stitched up, and empty in more ways than one. And he was gone with every cent. I couldn't move for hours. I sat on the floor holding that note, shaking, weeping. My baby. My only child. The one I gave everything for. I sold my kidney to save his life. And he stole that life and ran. The days after Tyrone disappeared felt like dying in slow motion. I didn't leave my apartment. I barely ate. My side burned where the stitches were still fresh, and every time I tried to sit up I saw stars. But the worst pain wasn't physical. It was the sound of his voice in my head, how he'd said, "You saved me, Mama." A lie wrapped in a whisper. I wanted to tell someone, but how could I? What was I supposed to say? That I flew across the world to let strangers carve into me for cash? That I trusted my gambling-addicted son to handle that cash responsibly? That I thought somehow this would make him love me again? No. There was no way to speak that kind of shame out loud. I stopped answering my phone. The ladies from church left messages. Miss Irma came by and knocked, said she had extra soup. I pretended I was sleeping. I couldn't let anyone see me like that. Cut open, humiliated, alone. About a week later, I got out of bed for the first time. I shuffled to the kitchen holding the wall like a cane. My legs shook. I opened the fridge and stared at half a jar of mustard and some wilted lettuce. The power had been shut off 3 days earlier. I hadn't even noticed. That night, I lit a candle and sat at the table in the dark. I spread out the bills. Electric, water, insurance. My pension covered almost nothing now. The rent was due in 5 days. I stared at the math until the numbers blurred. I sold my kidney and I was still broke. Still in danger. Still alone. I pawned my wedding ring the next morning. $50. I used it to buy soup, crackers, and a bottle of Tylenol. When I got home, I sat on the couch and wept so hard my stitches throbbed. The next thing to go was the TV. Then my necklace, the one my husband gave me for our 20th anniversary. Then the extra space heater. I called my old job at the clinic, begged them to let me answer phones, even just part-time. They said they'd call me back. They didn't. So I held on to hope. Maybe he'd call. Maybe he just needed time to think. Maybe he was scared and running and regretted it. I told myself all kinds of stories to make it through the days. Every time the phone rang, I froze. I kept thinking it would be Tyrone, ready to apologize. Ready to come home. But it never was. It was debt collectors. Scam calls. Wrong numbers. One night I heard footsteps outside my apartment. Heavy ones. I peeked through the curtain and saw 2 men standing by the lamppost, smoking. One of them pointed at my window. I froze. I stayed up all night with the lights off, clutching my old landline like it was a lifeline. The next morning, someone left a dead squirrel on my doorstep. Its neck was broken clean. I threw up in the sink. After that, I started double-locking the door. I pushed a chair under the knob at night. I stopped going outside. Even just opening the blinds made my heart race. 2 days later, someone taped a note to my window. It was scrawled in red marker. "You're next." I tried to tell myself it wasn't real. That maybe kids were playing games. But I knew better. Tyrone didn't pay his debt. And they knew where I lived. I went to the police station that afternoon. I waited over an hour before someone finally saw me. A young black officer named Reed took my statement. I didn't tell him the whole story. Just said I was receiving threats and that my son might be involved with the wrong people. He asked if I wanted to file a missing persons report. I said no. Because I wasn't ready yet. I still had some broken piece of me clinging to the idea that Tyrone would come back. That he'd walk through the door, crying, apologizing, ready to fix everything. I couldn't turn him in. Not yet. But I did ask for a patrol car to swing by my place sometimes. Officer Reed said he'd make a note. That was it. That night, I lay in bed clutching a kitchen knife under my pillow. Every creak in the walls made me flinch. I kept checking the window, terrified I'd see someone standing there. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The next morning, someone had spray-painted the word liar on my front door. Red, thick, dripping. I sat on the floor and cried like a child. The days blurred after that. My body never fully healed. I was too scared to go to the clinic and get my stitches checked. I didn't want questions. I didn't want looks. So I treated myself with rubbing alcohol and paper towels. Every movement hurt. Every breath reminded me what I gave up. Sometimes I caught myself talking to Tyrone like he was still in the room. Asking him if he remembered that time he got lost in the grocery store and cried so hard they had to shut the place down. Or the way he used to hold my pinky when he was scared of thunder. I told those stories out loud, hoping they'd bring him back. But all they did was break me further. One evening, I found a voicemail I hadn't heard before. It was left days earlier. I played it 3 times just to make sure. It was his voice. Not recent. An old message from before the surgery. He was laughing, telling me he was gonna make things right soon. I stared at the phone like it had burned me. That night, I sat at the table, looked at the note he left me, and realized something. He never loved me enough to stay. Not when I was healthy. Not when I was broken. Not even after I bled for him. And I loved him too much to see it sooner. But that love was turning into something else now. Something colder. Something sharper. Something that would make me stop waiting. Because one way or another this story was going to end. And next time someone knocked, it wasn't going to be my son. It was going to be the devil looking to collect. It's a strange thing, the way hope dies. You don't hear it. You don't see it go. One day you just wake up and it's not there. Like a light that burned out while you were sleeping. That's how I felt the morning I stopped checking my phone. I had nothing left to say to Tyrone. Nothing left to ask. The voicemail played in my head on loop, his voice promising to fix things. But those promises were dust now. My bank account was dry. My fridge was empty except for a jug of water and a single egg I didn't know what to do with. I sat on the couch that day and decided to sell the couch next. The pawn shop gave me $30. I used 10 for food and saved the rest. I learned how to stretch rice and soup into 3 meals. I stopped turning on the lights at night. I unplugged every appliance I didn't need. I told myself it was survival, not punishment, but deep down I knew the truth. I was punishing myself for being so blind. The scar on my side still ached. Some days I pressed my hand to it and whispered to the hole inside me like maybe it would whisper back. I felt like I'd lost more than an organ. Like Tyrone had taken part of my soul with him. And in its place he'd left silence. I thought I could live with that. But the silence didn't last. It started with the phone calls. No words. Just breathing. Heavy, sharp, deliberate. I hung up the first time. Second. By the third I sat and listened. I wanted to hear something, anything, that would tell me it wasn't real. That this wasn't happening. But I knew. I knew what was coming. One night around 2 in the morning I woke up to a noise outside. Not footsteps. Tires. A car idling outside my window. I peeked through the curtain and saw the same black sedan from before. A man got out. He didn't do anything. Just stood there smoking. Then he flicked the cigarette into my yard and drove off. The next morning someone had slashed my tires. The repair cost more than I could afford, so I left them flat. I wasn't going anywhere anyway. I tried calling Officer Reed at the precinct, but he was off duty. Another officer said they'd log the incident. That was it. No visit. No questions. I could tell they thought I was just some old woman scared of shadows. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen with a hammer in my hand, eyes fixed on the front door. I didn't cry. I didn't pray. I just waited. 2 days later, someone left a photo taped to my window. A picture of Tyrone. He was sitting at a poker table laughing, surrounded by chips. He looked healthy. Happy. Carefree. On the back they'd written, "We know where he is. You're the one who owes us now." I don't remember falling. Just the sound of my knees hitting the floor. That was when I knew. They weren't bluffing. They weren't going away. And they weren't looking for him anymore. They were looking for me. Thought about running. But where would I go? I didn't have money for a motel. I had no friends left to call. My sister passed years ago, and I wasn't about to bring this hell to any church friend's doorstep. So I stayed. Locked the doors. Covered the windows. Slept in the back bedroom with the dresser pushed up against the door. A week passed. Then another. One morning I opened the front door and found a package. No return label. Just my name scrawled on the top. I opened it slowly. Inside was a plastic sandwich bag filled with dirt and a single playing card. The King of Spades. His face was scratched out with a knife. That's when I knew they wanted to break me before they ever touched me. They wanted me scared, alone, desperate. And it was working. Every day I looked in the mirror and saw someone else. Someone hollowed out. Not the mother I used to be. Not the woman who survived her husband's death. Not the woman who once marched in protests and wiped tears off broken strangers in hospital rooms. I was a shadow now. But even shadows have limits. The last straw came when I found the front door unlocked one morning. I knew I'd locked it. I always double-checked. But the chain was dangling and the knob turned without resistance. I didn't find anything missing. But the smell was different. Like cheap cologne. Like someone had been inside and wanted me to know it. That was the day I stopped waiting. I went to the closet, pulled down the old file box with my husband's records, and found the folder Tyrone didn't know about. It had the phone number from the clinic, the printed receipts, the contact emails, the offshore transfer note. I laid them out on the kitchen table, took a deep breath and picked up the phone. I called the police. I asked for Officer Reed. When he answered, I told him everything. Not half. Not the cleaned-up version. Everything. I told him about Tyrone's debts. The threats. The surgery overseas. The lies. The theft. The photo on my window. The break-in. The fear that was eating me alive. He listened. Then he asked, "Are you willing to file an official report against your son?" I closed my eyes. And I said yes. Because love without truth had nearly killed me. And maybe justice wouldn't fix the scar on my body or the one in my heart. But it was the only thing I had left. Officer Reed told me to come in the next day to give a full statement. He said they'd open a case. Look into financial trails. Contact the clinic. I thanked him, hung up the phone and sat very still. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From something else. A quiet kind of strength I thought I'd lost. I went to bed that night with the door locked and the lights off. But for the first time in weeks I wasn't afraid of the dark. Because something in me had come back to life. Not hope. Not yet. But something close. Something called survival. I thought going to the police would bring some peace. I thought filing that report, signing my name to the truth, would build a wall between me and the danger. But it didn't. It stirred things up. The first week after my visit to the station I saw no one. No car parked across the street. No notes. No more dead animals. The silence felt like breathing room, and for a moment I believed maybe the police presence had scared them off. But then it started again. Subtler. Smarter. A rock through my back window while I was in the shower. The sound sent me sliding to the floor in a towel, heart racing, glass everywhere. No note this time. Just the cold wind coming through the broken pane. I called the station. Officer Reed came by himself this time. He looked around, took a few pictures and taped up the glass with cardboard from the trunk of his car. He asked if I had anywhere else I could stay. I told him no. He gave me a long look but didn't press. That night, I pushed the dresser tighter against the bedroom door and put a kitchen knife on the pillow beside me. By the next morning they had left another photo, taped directly to the cardboard covering the window. This one was older. A picture of Tyrone, maybe from college, smiling with his arm around me in front of the church. On the back, in thick ink, it said, "Still think the cops will save you?" I tore it up and flushed the pieces down the toilet. My hand didn't stop shaking for 2 hours. The fear came back worse than before. I jumped at every creak. I checked every lock 3-4 times a night. I kept a flashlight in my hand and slept with my shoes on. I started having dreams, visions of men breaking through the window, dragging me out of bed, knives at my throat. I woke up screaming more than once. I stopped answering calls. Even Officer Reed's. I didn't know what else to say. What could I tell him? That I was still alive, still terrified, still too broke to fix the window? Then one day I opened my door to get the mail and found a strange envelope on my doormat. No stamp. No address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 words. "Time's almost up." I dropped it. My knees buckled. I sat on the floor and sobbed like I hadn't sobbed since the day Tyrone left. I don't remember standing up. Don't remember crawling to the couch. But I do remember what happened after. Something in me went quiet. Not numb. Not panicked. Focused. I got up, walked to the table and opened the box of evidence I'd kept hidden. I spread out the receipts again. The bank records Tyrone left behind. The cash deposit slips from the offshore account. The shady clinic's name. I circled everything in red ink, then wrote out a timeline on the back of an old grocery list. The next morning I took it all to the police station in a grocery bag. I walked in like my legs weren't trembling. When I saw Officer Reed, I handed it to him without saying a word. He opened the bag, brows furrowing as he looked through the pages. "This is more than we had before," he said. "You sure you want us to move forward with this? You're filing against your own son." "I already filed," I said. "Now I'm finishing it." He nodded once and promised to elevate the case. He said they'd start tracking Tyrone's financial records, get subpoenas for any bank activity, trace the phone numbers connected to the offshore deal. They were opening a full fraud and endangerment case now, possibly grand theft. I walked home lighter than I had in weeks. Not because I felt safe, but because I'd stopped waiting to be saved. The following evening someone banged on my front door. I mean banged. Loud, violent, like they were trying to break it down. I didn't move. I sat frozen at the kitchen table listening to the wood creak and crack. A voice shouted through the door. "You're dead, old woman. You hear me?" It was low and rough, thick with fury. Then silence. I didn't breathe until I heard the car screech away. That night I called Officer Reed again. This time I told him everything. Word for word. He told me to stay inside and promised a patrol car would pass every 2 hours. He suggested I look into a panic button system or at least a security camera. I told him I couldn't afford either. He said, "We'll do what we can." And that was that. The next morning I found deep gouge marks on my front door. Like someone had dragged a knife across it. Over and over. I painted over them with leftover beige from the hallway closet. Something in me had changed. The fear was still there, but I had grown teeth of my own. I started answering the phone again. I kept Officer Reed on speed dial. I even started walking to the store again just to show I could. I'd lost a kidney, my savings, and the son I raised. But I was still here. Still breathing. Still dangerous enough to fight back. I put a folding chair near the front door. Sat in it every evening with my porch light on and my arms crossed. I made sure they saw me. If they were going to come for me, I'd be awake. They thought they'd broken me. But they had no idea what a mother becomes when she's got nothing left to lose. It happened on a Thursday night. Hot still, no breeze. The kind of night where everything feels too quiet before something breaks. I had just finished washing the dinner bowl. A little rice, some beans, when the banging started. Not knocking. Banging. Violent and fast, like fists trying to crack the door in two. I didn't freeze this time. I grabbed the phone and ducked behind the recliner in the living room. The voice outside was shouting now. "You think we won't come through this door? You think a lock's gonna stop us?" I could hear a second voice too. Lower, meaner. "She's bluffing. You got 5 seconds to open this door, you old witch, or we make a mess." My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. But my fingers moved on their own. I dialed 911. The operator answered with a calmness I envied. "Yes, I'm at 434 East Ridge Street," I whispered. "2 men are trying to break into my house. They're threatening me. Please, just send someone." The pounding continued. I crawled to the hallway. My side was throbbing again. The surgery scar never healed right and stress made it worse. The men outside didn't stop. One of them kicked the door so hard the whole frame rattled. I heard neighbors shouting now, someone yelling from across the street, "Hey! Get out of here!" Sirens. I'd never loved a sound so much in my life. By the time the patrol car turned the corner, the men had vanished. But they left their mark. A shattered porch light, deep scuff marks on the door, and muddy boot prints across my front step. I sat in the kitchen chair shaking while the officer took notes. Not Reed this time. A young woman named Hernandez. She was patient. He asked if I knew who they were. I told her no. But I told her who they were here for. I handed her a new folder. The one labeled Tyrone, Final. Inside was everything. His last known address. Photos. His email. The money trail. The details of the offshore clinic. Even a handwritten note he left me when I was still recovering. She read it, looked up, and asked gently, "Are you filing formal charges?" I nodded. Fraud. Grand theft. Medical endangerment. Everything you got. I want it all on record. I don't know what broke more in that moment, my fear or the part of me that still hoped he'd come home. By the next morning, they called me down to the precinct to sign an affidavit. It was thick. 4 pages. My hands trembled as I held the pen. This is serious, Officer Reed told me. We're not talking about a domestic dispute. This is federal-level theft, medical exploitation, and possible conspiracy. I signed anyway. He used my body, I said quietly. He stole my kidney and left me to die. If that doesn't count as a crime, what does? They started tracking him that same week. Turns out Tyrone hadn't been hiding. Not exactly. He was in another state, Nevada. Right back where he started. At the tables. Gambling like nothing ever happened. Using cash under fake names, but sometimes his own too. Arrogant. Careless. They traced one of his phone numbers to a burner registered at a liquor store outside Reno. Then flagged an ATM transaction from 3 weeks prior. Surveillance showed him withdrawing money wearing the same hoodie I'd bought him for Christmas 3 years ago. They had him. They just had to wait. I asked what would happen to me once they made the arrest. Officer Reed told me there'd be a media storm. That the story was unique. Extreme. And if it got out, the loan sharks might back off. Didn't want attention. That was the best case scenario. Worst case. They'd retaliate before he was even behind bars. So I stayed inside. A patrol car passed every few hours. A new lock was installed courtesy of a victim assistance program. They gave me a little panic button on a lanyard. Press it and they'd be there within 5 minutes. But 5 minutes is a long time when someone's kicking down your door. I barely slept. I sat up each night staring at the shadows, waiting. Waiting for justice. Waiting for payback. Waiting for a son who no longer existed. And then it happened. 4 weeks after the 911 call, Officer Reed showed up at my door. They got him, he said. I just nodded. He didn't resist. They caught him at a card table in a strip motel near Henderson. Had a fake ID but the fingerprints matched. He's in custody. Bail's been denied. I sat down slowly. My legs felt like paper. Did he ask for me? I said. Reed hesitated. No. That hurt more than I expected. But it also confirmed what I already knew. He was gone. The Tyrone I raised. The boy who used to run into my arms after school. The man I bled for. He didn't look back. They ran the story in the local papers. Mother sells kidney to save son, then turns him in after he robs her blind. I didn't give interviews. I didn't want the sympathy. But people noticed. Church ladies brought casseroles again. A neighbor offered to fix my porch light. Someone even sent me a gas card in the mail. The loan sharks? They vanished. Too much heat. Too much attention. They wanted shadows, not headlines. And I made sure they got none of the money. There was no refund. No reimbursement. The cash was long gone. My body still bore the cost. My soul too. But I slept that night. For the first time in months. Real sleep. No fear. No pain. Just quiet. Tyrone's name hasn't been spoken in this house since. I boxed up his photos. Donated his clothes. Threw away the last note he ever wrote me. Not because I hate him. But because I survived him. And sometimes, surviving is the only closure you get. The day of his sentencing, I didn't go to court. I sat by the window instead, holding the Bible my husband gave me, the pages worn thin where I turned to Psalms in every hard season. The sun was soft that morning. Warm. Chill. I watched it stretch across the front porch and touch the steps where Tyrone used to sit tying his shoes before school. The news came by phone. 12 years, Officer Reed said. Time served won't start until he's transferred to state custody. I didn't ask what Tyrone looked like. I didn't ask if he said anything. I only thanked Reed and hung up. Then I walked to the hallway mirror and looked at myself. Really looked. Not the widow. Not the woman who lost a kidney. Not the mother who got fooled. Just a woman who survived. In the weeks that followed, the noise around my name quieted down. The articles stopped. The reporters moved on. Nobody called asking for interviews anymore. I liked it that way. Let them chase something flashier. My health didn't bounce back. That scar on my side still aches when the rain comes. I tire more easily. My appetite never really returned. But I started walking to the mailbox again. Grocery store too. I began waving back to neighbors instead of hiding. People treated me differently now. Kinder in some ways, sadder in others. Some still didn't know what to say when they saw me. Others hugged me too long. I accepted all of it with grace. Let them feel what they needed to feel. I had already done my weeping. The police kept a watch on my home for a while. They checked in more than I expected, but eventually the check-ins faded. Just like Tyrone's face in my memory. The sharpness of it softened each day. Sometimes I wondered if I'd recognize him now. Sometimes I didn't want to. What stayed with me were the questions people never asked out loud. Do you still love him? Do you forgive him? And my answer, if anyone had the courage to ask, would be this. Of course I still love him. I loved him when he was born with a head full of hair and wouldn't stop crying unless I held him close. I loved him when he scraped his knee chasing the ice cream truck and told me I was his hero for making the pain stop. I loved him when he brought home bad grades and when he lied and when he stole $5 out my purse to buy candy. I even loved him the day he betrayed me. But I loved him like you love someone who no longer exists. Like a ghost. And ghosts, no matter how loved, don't belong in the house of the living. So I let him go. There's no forgiveness in me yet. I'm not holy like that. What he did shattered something I can't glue back together. But I've stopped feeding that pain. I've stopped letting it write my name in the dark. I've stopped checking the prison logs to see if he's been moved. Sometimes I sit in the back pew at church and watch the other mothers hold their babies. I don't envy them. I just hope they never find themselves in my shoes, praying over scars that shouldn't exist. I started attending the support group the victim advocate told me about. Not every week, but some nights when the silence grows too big. Most of us are older. Women who were taken for granted, manipulated, discarded. We nod when one of us speaks like we already know the ending. There's a comfort in being among women who carry invisible wounds. One of them, a lady named Miss Lorene, told me something I won't forget. You didn't lose a son. You released a sickness. It stuck with me. I still keep Tyrone's baby picture in my drawer. The one where he's smiling with his fist in his mouth and drool on his chin. I don't take it out often. But I don't throw it away either. That baby never hurt me. That baby never lied. One day the prison might release him. He might send a letter. He might call. He might say he's changed. That he found God. That he's sorry. If that day comes, I will not answer. Not out of hate. But because peace doesn't come from reopening old wounds just to see if they still bleed. I've learned to sit with the silence now. To let the quiet fill the space where his voice used to be. And in that quiet I've built something small, something steady. A routine. A life. Not the life I dreamed of, but a life I chose for myself. I tend to my porch plants. I fold my clothes while the news hums low. I let sunlight in through the curtains. And every now and then I smile. Because even though I gave up everything, even though I was broken and left behind, I am still here. Still breathing. Still mine. And sometimes, that is the loudest kind of justice there is.